Howdy, howdy, and welcome back for another Lord of Heroes video. And for today's video, we have finally made it to the advanced raid guide. And I know I've been promising this one to you guys for a while, but this was a lot of information that I wanted to compile, and here we are. Hopefully, when I edit this video, I was able to do it correctly because my recordings are all over the place. The last time we did the little raid guide and everything, we were just kind of talking about your basic little setup and some of what you need to bring and everything. But this time around, we want to get a little bit more in depth into our team building and some of the most important things that you have. You want to have probably one to two damage dealers. This is generally for your burst slots. You want at least two heroes that heal also in your burst slots. And then the rest of the heroes on your team provide some kind of support within buffing and debuffing the boss. That's generally the rule of thumb that you're going with building your team. When you're building your first team, you pretty much just take in whatever you have. But keep in mind that when building a raid team, you need 10 heroes to be completely built, but they do give you the support options that they add in extra. So if you need to fill in any blanks for what you don't have in your team, you can use those support heroes and they should work fairly decently. As you start getting into the higher stages, they don't work as well as they do in levels below 15, I would say. So there are various buffs and debuffs that you would need to have that I will go over in the later portion of this video. But mainly you're focusing in on one hero dealing the maximum amount of damage possible. Now, I do opt from just going for pure damage in the later stages because the boss can easily one-shot you if you're too squishy. So what I like to do personally is go for the 2-1-1 build. And gamer, what is the 2-1-1 build? All right, I will tell you, 2-1-1 being attack is going to be what you have two of, and then you're going to have your HP and your defense. So when I say things like 2-1-1 attack, that means attack is going to be the main stat that you have the most of. Then if I were to say 2-1-1 HP, then health will be the main stat. 2-1-1 defense will be the main stat. Or if I were to say 3-1 attack, then that means attack being the main stat, and the one could be HP or defense. So I'll say something like 3-1 attack defense. So you know that it's an attack build with defense as the secondary, and then you probably have HP and subs or something like that. Depending on how your gear rolls for you. That's kind of where I want to go with the build, but to be on the safe side, you go with a 2-1-1. Or you'll go for something like for your Blue Vanessa, who's your main support and healer, where you'll go for a 2-2-1 build. Like 2-2-1, isn't it only four slots, gamer? How you get a 2-2-1? Well, with her, you gotta remember that your ring and your necklace can also have HP, and since her attack and her defense is what her heal scale off of, you can opt for one of those slots to have HP in it. So you'll go for a 2-2-1 build, attack defense, or you can even go HP attack or HP defense, depending on how your substats roll, what your gear is like, and what do you prefer to have on her more. What's going to help benefit you more when doing your raid. You do need to have a lot of HP and defense to survive. Defense is an important stat because you got to mitigate as much damage as you take as possible, but HP is important a stat to have too. But since she is a healer that scales off of attack as well, it's going to be a little harder until you really get you some good gear to build her the proper way she needs to be built. But she is going to be the most important support hero in your team, your healer, because once you get into the later stages, she's going to be the reason your team stays alive just by her spamming her burst. And reviving your team to hopefully get another chance to get another round of attacks off, or at least your main damage dealer to be able to get another attack off before they die again. Then for all the other heroes on your team, you only really need one or two heroes to dish out damage, preferably two if you can, but really just one hero to do the maximum amount of damage. So every other hero can be built tanky to support what the main damage dealer is doing and what the rest of the team needs for the boss fight, so you don't have to go crazy for damage and hope that your team survives later on down the line. Sustaining is the most important thing in a raid. The longer you live, the more damage you get in the long run. So you want to really go for that once you get into those higher stages and it gets a little more difficult for you to fight, because you don't want to die, you want to live. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the strategy in which you're going to be implementing in the boss fight. Let's keep in mind that as you go along, the element does change. So you're going to be in points where your best heroes, especially your damage dealer, might be at the disadvantage. So early on, you're not going to be able to build to swap around to have enough heroes to do it. You really just want to get you a solid core team first, that first 10, and then you're going to go into later on building more heroes to kind of compensate for the lack thereof and when you're at the disadvantage in a later stage. You have two teams of five. Your main team is going to be where your main damage dealer sits, and preferably your blue Vanessa, just so they can have the burst slots and damage. Then you're going to want to have a turn bar booster there. If you are a spender and have Arslan, he's going to be the best turn bar booster to have in your team. You can have two turn bar boosters as well on that team comp, but generally you just want to have an attack buff on that team so your main damage dealer can dish out the most damage, and the rest of them kind of support keeping that damage dealer alive and just moving them as much as possible. And your support team, which is going to be filled up with mostly buffs and debuffs, just to keep them alive, and as well as debuff the boss so your main team can get out as much damage. And you can possibly have a damage dealer in that team as well, but their main focus is not to really do the most damage. It's just to get as much damage off before they probably die, and the rest of the team just sustain as long as they can until they eventually die off as well. In some cases, depending on what team I'm using, the support team might outlive the main team, and it's just because I might have like a few guardians in that team. But you generally either don't want a turn bar booster in that team, or you want your slower turn bar booster on that team, because you want the fight to start off with your best team doing damage first, because the boss steals turns when you attack, and you cannot reduce its attack bar by any means. It's completely immune to attack bar reduction. So that is something that is important, but you can boost your turn bar to kind of get in between turns, and having somewhere in the rams of about 150 speed or so is good enough for you to be able to take a decent amount of turns and not be too slow up against the boss. So that's something for you to think about when building your team. If you are familiar with the heroes on screen or anything like that, you can kind of see what kind of heroes that you will be bringing, or what you will be using, or you should be using at some point or eventually when other heroes are unlocked. I will have some visual representation from one of my favorite Korean content creators, Yuri, who is probably the most consistent on posting raid content. So it's the best I've seen by far on the kind of teams that you would need the heroes in their positions and the importance of those heroes, which I will talk about momentarily. Alright, so we're gonna take a look here at Yuring's video, and I'm just gonna break down the team composition and everybody's position. First, let's identify all the heroes that's in the video. So this is kind of what I see as one of the end all be all teams. There is room for some swapping around and some kind of improvements, and one of the reasons why I felt like I made some poor decisions early on in my global account as well. But maybe they make some changes in the game where my decision making might not be as bad as what I thought it was. So we look already over here to the left in the main team. We have Green Lapis in the burst position. You're gonna know your burst positions because they're gonna be the first two slots to your left. So like I was saying, you can see that it's them here and then over here. So we got the green Lapis here, and then we got the blue Vanessa. These are your main two heroes in this composition. If you haven't start saving up to get your green Lapis, you should do that now. Don't worry about ascending heroes because it's not really that important to ascend. You're going to be able to get through the content of the game all the way into the extreme without ascending anybody, and that's for you guys, the F2P players and you casual spenders that are under a $200 a week budget. And for you guys that are in those higher budgets, well, if for you guys that are above $100 budget, somewhere between 100 maybe $200 a week, you should be starting to push towards getting green Lapis. Start doing your spending towards getting green Lapis, and then the blue Vanessa is who you're gonna prioritize after getting him together. Then we have the Red Rosanna, who came with Arslan when the game first came out in March, though we don't have her now. Then we have the Blue Yashua. The Blue Yashua is the best turn bar booster in the game. He is insane for all content because he is a sniper, and snipers have the burst gauge gear that gives you more burst gauge, and turn bar boost skills give off a lot of burst gauge. Thus, in combination of those two together, will generate a lot of burst for your team to be able to use the burst as often as possible. So that makes him important to have in your team. Then we have Arsenal, who is your main support for your attack buff, so your green Lapis can put out damage. But the Rosanna, she does some damage. She can do some good damage, but her main purpose is to provide a shield for your team. So now you have a shield on top of having your attack buff. So if you don't have these heroes, other options could be the red Nessa, as well as having the red Yashua for your team, and then blue Chrome for the extra turn bar boost. So those are some free to play options to replace for your main team if you're not able to have these heroes, and most of us which won't have these two. But for your second team, your main burst gauge for this one is the red Lapis. The red Lapis has the best debuffs for the raid and bringing in the crit rate and crit damage down debuffs. He's the only hero that has it, and it's on his burst, so it's important. Him doing damage is not important. You really want him to be tanky. If you can get some crit or some stats like that in between, that's great. But really, this is what you want. He's not currently in the game, so we won't be able to have that. So just having someone else that does damage, or having even like a water frame or even a red Zyra for just having extra attack breaks and defense breaks on a burst couldn't be bad either, but generally you're going to opt to have another damage dealer or maybe even another healer. Then we have the blue Aleph here. Is also your second damage for the team, but generally you'll just have a support to heal and keep this team alive. Then we have the red Lyre, which this is what Frem is in position of, but you technically need both anyway. But the red Lyre, she provides your death break for your team. And what makes her good is the fact that she can do that on the boss's turn if this team gets attacked, and she counterattacks because she's a warrior. Then you have the green Lumi, who we also don't have, which was the first hero they added in the game back in April when we got into our first month and everything. and she provides attack break as well as a slow, so it can be helpful. Then you have your blue Basilica, who gives you the damage down debuff, which is important because only her and the red Mah-Lon has these. So pick her up in the contract when you get her, since she's going to be really beneficial to mitigating the boss damage. But until then, you can build the red Mah-Lon. So let's take a look and see what happens in this fight. So you can see that the first team is going off to get that initial damage off. They getting buffed up, being prepared. Arslan did not land the attack break, but it's okay. No counter attacks, but it's all right. So getting through those first cycles is rough because a lot of the heroes need their skill one to go off and not skill two, but the AI is going to always prioritize skill two. So once we get through these first attacks, we'll see what happens. You can see you gaining a lot of burst because he instantly went into the burst skill for Green Lapis on the next turn, and then you can see someone dies here. So the damage is great. If you're not getting those skills off to mitigate damage early on, you might lose someone early on as well. This is why you don't really go for two damage dealers like that. One damage dealer is fine, and having something else. Now you can see that he did get the debuffs off, but the boss cleansed, and now it got his crit damage buff. So we got both the attack break and the damage down on. So it's going to mitigate a lot of damage that your team is going to take as this fight persists on. Now we got the red Lapis that's doing burst, and we should have not only the crit rate down, but the crit damage down. So this is total annihilation to the boss's damage. And this is a level 45 boss that Yuring is taking on. So it looks like that was a lot of damage, but imagine how much damage that would have been if you didn't have those debuffs on. So keeping those debuffs up is greatly important. And you're going to see this throughout the fight. Now we got the death break, so more damage possible, and some team up action. That's always great. But they're going to start dying off one by one, and then there's no heals in the second team. It's just mostly trying to get that initial burst off and having Green Lapis and the blue Vanessa pretty much carry from there. And you're going to start seeing towards the later parts of this video the carry potential and what happens. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit to a point where the blue Vanessa goes for her big heal, revive, get her team back up, because this is going to be something that's going to be important after the second team dies. And she's spamming it now. So you need a lot of bursts. It's going to take a lot of investment into your team to get to this level and to get this strong to be able to rapidly go through. There's a lot of skill ups and a lot of just max building these heroes. Keep in mind, everybody is level 62. I want to catch the boss when the boss actually hits the team and completely destroys the team with damage. Now you can see a lot of them died. A lot of them died. But the blue Vanessa, she comes in, she reses the team, and brings everybody back to life. Now this is insane. And she just boom and right back at it. And this is all before the boss gets another turn. So there's a lot of investment to make sure this happens. A lot of speed sinking and everything that is required. And then once this happened, you're pretty much dead. But you got a strong enough blue Nessa, then she could do this and give your team another chance to get a little more damage off. And if you got a fast enough booster, you can probably push your team to have them go again. So I really like Yuring. This has been one of the main channels I watch. There's a few other channels that I watch, even for some of the raid content, but this is the main channel that I watch for raid content. Yuring generally posts at least a raid video or a two a day. So make sure you check Urine. I'll leave a link to the channel in the description box below. I don't know if they understand English, but big shout out to Urine for doing such a great job at come up with this content. And this is how I kind of understood and came up with the concepts and everything that I will be sharing with you guys in this video. So let's move on. Right now to the next session. Let's talk about the tier list and the changes that I have made with the tier list. There was a lot of important things that happened because after studying Yuring and a few other Korean YouTubers and what they use and what they brought into their battles, my opinions on other heroes have changed. Let's keep in mind everything in the C tier is like don't build, don't use for the raid. Well, I won't say don't use, but they just don't provide enough for the raid. The B tier provides some good stuff, but they're not the best options to have. But generally, like the ones that's in the support are the better ones. They are better for your damage and all of that good. I mean, better for providing debuffs that will be useful, but mostly debuffs that are on their second skill, not necessarily their first skill. So that's what makes them not as good as the heroes that are in the A tier, which the A tier are mostly some of your okay damage dealers, I would say, but really it's the supports that stick out a little bit most. They provide some really good things, and that's just where that kind of stands at for them. Then the S tier are like some of the best heroes that you will want to add into your team comp moving forward, and that, and then of course at the very top everyone who I deem burst should be used if you were to use them. So let's explain why the A tier is what it is, because I think the B tier I pretty much just covered that decently. So let's go into the A tier and look at some of the heroes. So you're going to see some of the boosters that's in that you get in the game going to be in this A tier section. Your Chrome, your Rosanna, and your Mei-Ling. They're all in here because they're solid. They do their job with the boost, and Chrome does give you that health regen, which is beneficial and kind of needed during your fights too, just for more sustain. Rosanna good at surviving because she's also a guardian, and then just the Green May Link, she's just a booster, so just having that extra booster to push your team can be beneficial. So she kind of works there. Then we got like the Green Lumi, who also provides some good debuffs for you, attack break as well as a slow, I believe, which is pretty beneficial and useful for your team. Your budget Arslan you have with the red Yashua giving up an attack break and some invincibility to one of your heroes, which I believe it's the one with the highest attack or something like that. So it's going to be useful for your main party if you built him and you got him in your team, and hopefully you got him built as a tank. You could go for the damage hybrid and go for something in that sort, but generally you just want him to be tanky to support your main damage dealer. Then we got the blue Olivia. The blue Olivia, she does provide some debuffs, a bit of sustain for herself. She is a great hero to have in your secondary team for your support line. She's good on when the option of having a hero of a disadvantage is at a disadvantage to the fireball. She's like a better option to have when at. But if she's just somebody that you have and want a part of your normal team, then you just go for what you know, right? Then we got the Red Johan, who isn't commonly seen from what I've looked at in a lot of the raid videos, but I think he's pretty solid. Giving your team a crit damage up and crit rate up buff. Those aren't those aren't the best buffs, but they are still pretty decent. So you can have that in your main or your secondary team. I mean, preferably you would like it in your main team, but it's hard to squeeze in something like that in your main team. So it might be a little bit better in your secondary team for your second damage dealer until that team just dies off. Then we got our damage slots here, where we got the green asterisk, which her burst, just she ignores defense completely, so she can get a lot of damage off in her burst if she bursts. So that's great. Then she's a sniper. Snipers are really important to have in the raid. Like, snipers provide so much burst for your team because you're going to need to get as much burst as possible. You really don't want to miss a turn when it comes to having your burst gauge, because the turn you miss could be the turn that your blue Vanessa dies. And we don't want that. We want to get as much damage as we can possible. So having at least 1 to 2 snipers in your team is kind of important. Then we have the red pup, which he's a striker, so just more damage. Same with Blue Helga, more damage. But the red pup does have thorn buff, so the boss can do some damage to itself if you do use him for burst, which is an option. Then we have the Dark Mikhail in here, which can do some considerable damage if he's built out. The Green Mei-Ling, I mean not Green Mei-Ling, but the Green Lyrae is the same way. She buffs herself in all aspects, so she can get a lot of damage ramped up on her, but that's all that she provides is damage. And that's what mostly these heroes in the damage slot for A tier, all they provide is really damage and nothing else. The same with the Red Ashton, the Dirty Bird, and the Blue Sophie. Even though she's the newest addition to the game, she does have an attack buff on her main skill, but since her skill 2 and her burst stuns and a boss is completely immune to stun, she practically useless at that point, but she's a striker, so she still will do some decent damage. So she does have that going for her. This is definitely not the content where she's going to shine at the most, but this is something that you could use her in just because she's a striker. Now let's move on to the S tier for our support category. Now we have a lot of heroes here that has entered this spot. I've made a lot, like I said, I've made a lot of changes in my thoughts in who all is good and everything. So we have the Green Charlotte starting off, which she's probably going to be your secondary healer for your team, which is going to keep those other guys alive a little bit long until they eventually die off and keep it moving. Once we get the Light Olivia, she is a decent one to have. She does give an attack buff. You can use her burst for the heals, but generally she's just going to be the attack buff for your secondary team. That's kind of how she works. Red Nessa, who can be used for her burst. She's good at pairing up with Chrome for just super high sustain later on, because they both just work so well together at sustaining each other. You don't get a lot of extra damage because you just got them to be tanky, but it does give you a little bit more to work with, and that's when you put her in a burst slot. Or you can just use her purely for the defense buff and the heal off of the defense buff, and she can be in your main team or your secondary team depending on what and it works for you best. I will say test out your team comps, test out your capabilities to see how your team's gonna best suit work with each other, because that's going to be an important thing. And we have the Blue Vanessa. She should be in a tier of her own, honestly, because she is the best hero for the raid. Hands down, number one, best hero for the raid. I'm currently working on maxing her out now. I'm skilling her up, as well as I am looking to 2A her soon as I can possible. Another 150 $200 so I can get the most stats out of her as possible, because I got her as maxed as much as I can outside of her level being 60. I will hopefully be able to take her level 60 soon enough, maybe next month sometime, once the packs reset and everything. hopefully be able to do that so I can have her survive a little bit longer because her survival she doesn't really survive good for me, but I want her to be able to put out big heals and still survive. So I'm probably gonna have to temper with her gear, move some gear around from my other clerics to kind of see what works best for her, and then making sure she is above at least 150 speed or so, just so she can be on par with the boss and move before the boss and keep my team sustained as best as possible. Once I get some good enough gear to get like really good subs and everything, then we'll opt to be on a more riskier build because the subs will carry me. But she's definitely something that you want and you're going to need to build. She is important. So if you don't have her now, you need to be getting those gems saved up to get her. Make sure you get her. The hero that I am looking forward to the most right now, my number one most wanted hero is the Blue Yashua. And because the Blue Yashua is brokenly OP, powerfully stupid. And I've mentioned it already in this video, and I'm going to mention it again. He is the only turn bar booster that is a sniper so far in the game. Snipers got the burst gauge gear that gives you extra burst. Turn bar boosting skills can give you extra burst as well, which makes him give you a lot a turn bar to a lot a bursts to add to your team to have that burst gauge ready and going as much as possible, so your main damage dealer and your blue Nessa can keep they burst up and ready. Green Arslan, you know what he does. You know how he is. Enough said. Moving on. Blue Charlotte. Someone that I haven't been giving love throughout my tier list, and she has been updated to be in higher tiers in all of my tier lists now that I've learned how great she is. I built her early on my 9 account when I first started, but I stopped messing around with her. Then I just rebuilt her recently to test her out in the raid because I was seeing her use so much. It's another content creator from Korea that uses her quite often. She's like her main heal. She's like the main healer for their secondary team, and it's like just seeing her max build perform so well. But she does need to be invested into. Her and Green Charlotte, for them to really shine the way they need to in the raid, they need to be max skill investment, max build, and they will get you garner you a lot of success. All right, next one. We have the Blue Basilica. Now, I mentioned her as well as one that you should be picking up in a contract. Maybe even the first contract once you get to your tier 3 contract. Like, she's literally that good. Because outside of the red Mei Ling, she's the only other hero in the game that I have seen and I have tested that does the damage down debuff. So that makes her important just for that debuff alone. Red Lyre, who is also a really stellar unit for the raid. The fact that she's a warrior and she can counterattack and land her death break on the boss's turn makes her a little bit on par with Fram Death Break, because Fram gives a 2-turn Death Break and Lyre gives a 1-turn Death Break until skilled up, but you don't necessarily have to put skill investment into her. She just need to get hit and counterattack. So you get her on 4 counter sets so she can get that 45% chance, and she can get the attack break off on the boss's turn so you don't have to worry about it on your turn, so you get more damage. Red Lapis, the second most brokenly OP stupid support in the game, because he's the only hero that has the crit rate and crit damage debuff. Enough said, moving on. Fram, we just mentioned talking about Lyre. 2-turn death break. No, not much investment. You just slap on a triple set of the Guardian gear, and she just survives. She just barely takes any damage. She can mitigate as much damage as needed possible and still do some decent damage herself. And actually a stellar unit to use for the burst as well, so you can have that 2-turn attack break just off of her doing burst if you were to opt to use her in that fashion. I've done it and tested it out a couple times. It works pretty well. I don't generally use it all the time, but it is something that you can do. Red Mah-Lon, just like I said about the blue Basilica, she's the only hero, and she's the first one you get her early on that she can apply not only just that damage down debuff, she gives you sap, and she can give you sap and a regenerate buff on her skill too. So that's like hella beneficial that she can provide that and for your team. And I just started building her. I've built her up not on my 9 account because I have the blue Basilica there, but I've built her up on my Rosanna account, which is the main global account, and I've been using her in my raids, and she's been doing fairly well. The Red Rosanna. Now, we don't have her yet in the game, but she does give your team a shield based off her attack. So she can dish out some good attack and give you a decent shield for your team. Like I was saying in the earlier part of the video, it helps for your main team. That is great. The light Mah-Lon. Now, you can't get her until you complete Cartus on Extreme. I really don't advocate for rushing to beat the Extreme boss. Work on your raid. She'll come later. Once you get to a certain point and you can go there and beat him, she is a great addition to have to your team. She's not exactly the main team focus, but a secondary team focus for more sustain. Her first skill, she just pretty much spam that and she can heal the team up. It is based off of her attack, so she does need a bit of attack, but you do want her to be somewhat tanky so she doesn't die right away. How can she sustain if she can't survive, right? So you want her to be able to attack as frequently as possible, so having a little speed on her and having someone to push her as well will be beneficial in her getting that secondary team more heal sustain. Now moving on to the S tier, damage. Best damage dealers by far is going to be the blue Aleph and the green Lafas. They are the two best damage dealers. Blue Aleph we don't have in the game currently, so we can't get her, but green Lafas, you can save up. You can take your time. You can use the events. You can use all the extra compensation for when they put out new content. You can use all these different things that they give us. This L, the extra renown, and the renown that you can farm up. If you stack it up, you can eventually get you a green Lapis. I'm already on my baby account, which is my Mah-Lon account, above 1 million renown, pushing to get that green Lapis on that account just so I can have that, just so I can have him ready for that account once I start doing raids on that account. So if I can do it, you can do it. If you're new and this is the first video that you saw of mine, I'm gonna tell you like this: do not use any renown. Save all your renown for the green Lapis. Trust me, you can get through this game by max building the green Charlotte and the blue Helga and just 6-star them. Just promote them both to 6-star and let them carry you. They can do a good job of that. You don't need anything else to carry you that way. That's if you wanna go that route. That's if you want to go that route. Some of you are not patient, so you can go a different route, and I'll talk about that in my tier list videos for the early, mid, late game because I'm redoing those as well. Moving on. Arslan. Arslan. All right, moving on. Green Basilica. This is the one that I've been talking about the most because she is the boss killer and she is the first free to play option that you have. If you are advocating to push for the raid as your main focus when you start this game, your first contract should be Green Basilica. She should be your 15-day contract. She will get you through the story. She'll get you through boss fights as you need it, and she will get you more damage in the raid when you pick her up. She got a decent burst, but it's really her skill too that's going to be important. So she is going to need some skill investment in a bit of max building to see her true potential later on down the line. So you can save your resources and max build her, and you can like opt out of the green Lapis until you're just ready to start stacking up and just later on do it, or you can just get her, progress her pretty far through and still go for the green Lapis and just don't ascend or anything like that. That's an option. Then we got the red Aleph. Red Aleph, she's a striker. Strikers do a lot of damage. That's kind of the thing. But she definitely need to be max crit because she ignores her defense off of being able to crit. If she doesn't crit, then the only thing you're going to get is that 20% from the striker gear. The Light Olivia, of course, she is brokenly bustedly stupid. She's the most expensive hero in the game, so her multipliers are a little bit better than everything else in the game. So you don't necessarily need her for the raid, and even some of the people I see that do use her, they don't use her like she's the main damage dealer. Green Lapis is still main damage dealer, just because he inherently just does more damage because of how his skill works, opposed to her just ignoring defense. So she's not exactly important, but she does do crazy damage. The Green Nine is one I think I had him in like A tier before, but I put him in S just because I use him and he's my main deeps on my 9 account. And seeing the damage that he's able to output is actually pretty decent, and he has some self sustain. Like that's another reason that makes the Green Life is so good is the self sustain that is in his kit, so he can survive and dish out damage the same way Green 9 can survive and dish out damage. And because of that, that's what makes him a S tier solid hero. Now I put the Light Sophie in here with no. I seen one video where she was used and she did some decent damage, but they still more likely just testing her out. And I put her in here because she's an expensive hero. I only expect her to do well just because she's an expensive hero. But this can also change later on. Now with our burst slots. Now I've moved some heroes that wasn't in burst into burst, and I believe the main ones that I put up in here was probably the blue Charlotte, the blue Fram, and the red Zyra. I put all of them in the burst slots because they are solid for the burst for they are solid heroes that can be used for burst. Zyra mostly because you can get a 2-turn defense break off of her burst, which can be beneficial for you dishing out more damage if you use her in your secondary team. The same way with Fram getting that 2-turn attack break off her burst if you're using her in your secondary team. And then the blue Charlotte just sustaining your team and sustaining herself because she can get a shield off of her first skill, and then she can put health regen plus big girl heals off of her burst as well as her second skill that can heal and do a good job of pushing your team. Then of course we got both Sophies in here. You only expect them to do a lot of damage, so they're in here because of those reasons. I don't think I've changed any other heroes, and I'm not going to go over the reason why every other hero is in here. Mostly is because of damage, or it's some kind of debuff that they have in their kit for on their burst is the reason why they are in the use burst position on this tier list. Now let's move on to the supports, little things that they give you when you setting up your squad. Squad 1 and Squad 2. Yeah. No, I never said naturally read that this said squad. Alright, so you get a list of supports. All of these supports are the contract heroes you get in the game. So I'm going to kind of just briefly, well, actually, we're just going to go over the supports and some of the ones that you kind of want to put to great usage. Number one, of course, Green Lucy is one that you're going to want to put into the burst. Now, pretty much, I use the supports to fill in the gaps of what I might not have in the battle. Like if I need, let's say, a damage down debuff, then we bring in the support for the Blue Lucy. She provides that. If we need the defense break, we can bring in the Red Lyra. We can use those. If I need that extra little turn bar boost support, we definitely got the Blue Chrome that we can bring in. But generally, outside of bringing these heroes, we're looking for some of the ones that we want to put in the burst slot sometimes, especially for like the second fight after we done used all our best heroes up. So yeah, you definitely got heroes like these here that are pretty solid for the burst, I would say. Like these are generally the heroes that, like some of the heroes that you want to put in for the burst slot. Keep in mind that you do only have 3. Let's just throw in some random stuff. You can only put 3 of these heroes, so you need at least 2 of yours to be in, or rather just one of your heroes in each slot, but at the very least of 2. So you see here, only 3 support heroes can join each squad. So normally I just want to put the ones that's going to probably garner the most damage. Generally, the striker provide the most damage, so we have them in the burst. Then the ones that's going to give us like the most like support, we put those in the other slots, so we can make sure we're straight there. And that's pretty much it. It's not really any rocket science when it comes to placing these heroes in these spots. It's just basic simple information. So I can give an example of how I would construct a team. Let's just say I put in my damage dealer, my blue Nessa here. Then I want a turn bar booster. Now this is just setting up my first squad. My first squad for what I may be needing to have to come into the battle. So I'll probably stop there and think about what do I want my second squad to have. Of course, I will want to come in with another damage dealer. Let's say that. Then we'll probably bring another healer or something. We then I'm thinking like damage down, death break here. Now, assuming that I don't have anything else to fill in the roles, what else could I bring into the battle? Maybe I want another defense break, so I bring in one of the supporters. Maybe I want extra damage down, so I just bring in a supporter here. Or if I wanted to have another, and I want to have some more sustain in my team, then I just go with something like that. So now I'm filling out my team for whatever I may need to come into the battle. Granted, I don't have enough heroes to fill out my team for it to be at its best, because I could with a bunch of damage dealers, but just having just raw damage is not enough. You want the utility, because just having a bunch of damage dealers, they're going to be squishy, they won't survive, and early on the supporters are going to do a lot more than what they will do later on when they kind of fall off. So you definitely want to get your main team as strong as you can get them possible. All right, so let's assume I don't really have much at all to provide, and I need damage and lots of support for my team in general. So, like I said before, we'd do something like this. Now, I know I need another hero to fill this slot. Let's just say we throw you in here. So now I need to fill my team up with more heroes to support. So we got our death break, turn bar boost here. We bring in our damage down there and some extra support through there. And then we'll do something like this just to make sure that we have as much as we need, just because we just don't have enough heroes to fill out, or something like that. Or the heroes we have are just not strong enough that the supporters are a little bit stronger than our main heroes. Like I even go as further as our damage dealers maybe not as strong as the supporters are, so we just put like our best heroes here. We just say like, let's just for instance, these two are just weaker than the supports that they provide us with, and we just bring in our 2 best healers, and we'll go for a build like that and bring in the supporters in this way. And I want to clarify that the Green Lucy and the Red Aleph are the best damage dealers for the supports, just because both of them have some self-sustain. Green Lucy, of course, when you're early on in your raid team building, you're gonna find yourself seeing that the support Green Lucy outlives your whole team, just because she's just that much better. But these two have a bit of self-sustain, so they are going to be the best ones for this slot. And then some of the other ones can kind of fill in there. So as a side note, so then I go in and fill in the rest of what my team needs. Or let's say I didn't have a booster, so I wanted my turn bar boost up here or something, and just bring in whatever the best that I can. So I go for a team setup like that. We got both my healers, both of my damage dealers, but the rest of my team really is not much. So we just bring in as many of the supports as possible, and then this keeps it open so you're able to effectively do two runs, because a lot of people, when you first start off, you might not have all the heroes unlocked, but once you get all of the heroes from normal mode unlocked, then you should be able to easily run two teams. Granted, you make sure you max out your supporters. So this is pretty much how you do your support setup. So let's move on. Now let's go over to our buffs and debuff section. Pretty much here in your menu, you'll go here, click on the little icon right here that shows your combat power, and then up in the top left corner where the question mark is, this is the area, the little help menu section, where you can see all of the things about the game, and we can go here into buffs and debuffs, so you can go over and read all the list of the buffs and debuffs that's in the game. Some of these buffs and debuffs, we don't even have heroes for them yet. They haven't even been introduced yet. Like, we don't have a revived buff yet, which I know what hero that is, but that's only if they actually put it on that hero on release. But we have plenty of things. Like, before we even had a hero with Wither was here, like unrevivable. That's something that's not quite in the game. And then max health reduction. Like, you can go through and see what everything does. And one thing that's important is knowing the difference between the damage dealt and the attack down. Like, the difference between them. I generally say attack break and damage down for to differentiate between the two, but we're going to talk about the buffs and debuffs that are going to sort of be the important ones to have for this fight. For your buffs will be the attack buff, probably the defense buff. I don't think it's the super important to have a defense buff, but I mean, to mitigate as much damage as possible, defense buff is great. Invincibility is another one that can be useful, but not critically important to have. Regenerate buff is great to have for your team, and there's various heroes that provide it. And then the shield buff, which also has various heroes, and some heroes can shield themselves, which can also help in that regard. Then we have the attack break, the crit rate down, the crit damage down, the damage down, and the defense break. Those are generally the most important ones. Now, there's other buffs and debuffs that you could bring that could be helpful, but these are the ones that I see as the most important to have. Unfortunately, there's only one hero that can give you the crit rate and crit damage down, and he's not currently in the global. But keep in mind, when they do give us the red Lapis, if you have that money, you spend that money, because he is brokenly OP, powerfully stupid. But look carefully and look closely, because there is a difference between the attack break and the damage down. And there's currently only two heroes from what I've tested in the game that has the damage down debuff, and they both have them on their first skill, and that's the red Mah-Lon and the blue Basilica. If you are building for a raid team, you're going to need both of these heroes built. That is important, so keep that in mind. Moving on. So let's talk about who you should be skilling up. So I have it in this order, starting with your turn bar booster, your blue Vanessa, your damage dealer, your debuffer. That's my rule of thumb right now for how your skill ups should go. So my main turn bar booster is the Green Arslan here. He has, once you get him maxed in his second skill, it goes down to a 2-turn cooldown. Now, you can go also with the Blue Crown, which he is also goes down to a 2-turn cooldown once you get his second skill maxed up. The other boosters are, so I believe, like a 3-turn cooldown or something like that. So he's definitely a good option as the first hero to put skill ups in, not only for the raid but just for the rest of the game as well, just because his usage and his utility everywhere else. So he's a great option for you to go with. Then I say the blue Vanessa next because you need her to be able to output as much healing and as much survivability as possible. Once you get the spirit cost of this down to 3, she'll be getting this up and off as frequently as possible. Then her recovery rate is extremely high. And then she also gives the leech buff, giving your team a bit of self-sustain, which you can get an extra turn for this skill, and it goes down to 3 turns, so she can have this up every 3 turns, so your team always have a leech buff every 3 turns. Then the same with her being able to sustain herself based off of her little extra damage she would do. She has a skill that one of her heals is based off of her attack power, which is her second. So she's going to do some okay damage as well. I wouldn't say it's the big damage, but she's going to do some decent damage. So she's going to be able to do a bit of sustaining for herself. And because of her effectiveness in the raid and her ability to carry your team to get more damage, this is the reason why I say she should have your skill ups after you done with your booster. And pretty much you just need to get your booster skill max, get their second skill max. That's pretty much it. You need to get their second skill max, and once you get that second skill max, you can go straight into your blue Vanessa and start skilling her. After that, it's your main damage dealer. Whoever your main damage dealer is going to be. So you have to make a stellar decision. Like if you're going to be using Green Basilica as your main damage dealer, then that's cool. If that's who she is. It could be anybody. If Blue Pup was your main damage dealer, then yeah, go with that. But pretty much follow the tier list and the guidelines for that. So chances are, yeah, it will be Green Basilica unless you are saving or putting forth money towards getting the Green Lapis, then you should put that skill investment into him next. Then I say a debuffer, at least one of your debuffers to be skilled up, so sort of kind of. Now this you can actually opt out of and go a different route. You don't necessarily have to skill up one of your debuffers. You can go for max skilling someone else, getting another damage dealer skilled up, getting another cleric skilled up, depending on what you need for not only your raid but for the rest of the game. And we have this new content, the obelisk, so you might want to put forth some skills into a hero that's going to benefit you more in the obelisk as well, which could possibly be one of your debuffers. So that is a thing too. So that's just a thought that I have when it comes to who you should be skilling up. So I believe this covers everything so far for my thoughts with the raid. It took me a while to really get my information together, compile my thoughts, get enough video footage for visual representation. Hopefully when I edit it all comes out right. If I missed anything and please leave that in the comment section below so the community can know. If not, we talk about it in later videos. Probably not one as long as this one, but we just vaguely mention it in our videos. So pay attention to the little nuances and things that I say in my videos because it usually be important information that I might have missed in a previous video. So, if you did enjoy it and you learned something new, make sure you smash that like button. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but there is another button for you guys as well. Link to our Discord where we talk not only about the raid, but all the other content in the game will be in the description box below, as well as the pinned comment below. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe because I'm putting out that heat on a weekly basis, so you don't want to miss a beat. And turn those notifications on. And this is your host, Gamer Dude 2088, signing out saying much love, God bless, deuces.